The colony was small, resting on the edge of human-controlled space. It was a quiet place, with dusty roads, a sky filled with two suns, and fields of silver grass that swayed whenever the wind passed by. The people who lived there were not rich or powerful. They were farmers, miners, and ship workers. Their colony was far from the big cities of Earth and the great stations in orbit, but to the children who grew up there, it felt like the center of the universe. Sam was one of those children. His father worked as a ship mechanic, and his mother grew vegetables in the small greenhouse behind their home. Sam was curious, always taking apart broken machines to see how they worked. His hands were often covered with grease, and his clothes had patches from crawling under engines. He liked the sound of ships lifting into the sky. He dreamed of one day flying away to explore the stars. Myra, his closest friend, was different from him in almost every way. She was clever with words instead of tools. She liked reading stories about heroes, kings, and explorers from both Earth and alien worlds. While Sam spent his afternoons fixing small drones, Myra spent hers sitting under the large ironwood tree at the edge of the colony, reading and writing in her notebook. But no matter how different they were, Sam and Myra were always together. They raced through the fields, climbed the rusty ladders of abandoned towers, and made up adventures in which Sam was the fearless pilot and Myra was the brilliant commander. They were children of the colony, bound by friendship and dreams too big for the small world they lived in. One evening, the sky was painted with streaks of orange as the suns lowered behind the hills. The air was warm, and the stars began to peek out one by one. Sam and Myra sat side by side on the roof of an old shuttle that had not flown in many years. The shuttle was broken, with missing panels and cracked glass, but to the children, it was their castle. From there, they could see the entire colony, the fields stretching far, and beyond them the glowing lights of distant ships crossing the night sky. "Do you think we'll ever leave this place?" Myra asked. She hugged her knees and looked up. Her voice was soft but filled with longing. Sam grinned, brushing some dirt from his hands. "Of course we will. One day, I'll fix this shuttle and fly it myself. You'll sit beside me, and we'll go wherever we want. Maybe to Earth. Maybe to the stars no one has seen yet." Myra smiled at the thought. "And when we grow up, what will we be?" "You will be a pilot, yes. But what about me?" "You." Sam thought for a moment. "You'll probably be a queen or something. You're smart enough. You'll tell armies what to do and make peace with aliens." Myra laughed. "A queen in a place like this? You must be joking." "I'm not," Sam said firmly. "You'll be a queen, and I'll still be here, fixing ships." There was silence for a while as the two watched a starship pass across the sky, leaving a glowing trail. Then, almost without thinking, Sam said, "When we grow up, I'll marry you." Myra turned her head quickly. "What did you say?" "I said I'll marry you." Sam's face turned red. He had spoken without planning, but he did not take the words back. "That way, when you're a queen, I'll be the one standing next to you. And if you're not a queen, then we'll just be here, together. Either way, it's a promise." Myra's eyes softened. She looked at him for a long time, then nodded slowly. "A promise," she repeated. "But promises are heavy, Sam. You cannot just throw them away later." "I won't," Sam said. He raised his hand as if sealing a deal. "I'll keep it." Myra placed her small hand against his. Their hands were dirty from climbing and playing, but to them, it was like a royal oath. The stars above seemed to shine brighter at that moment, as if the universe itself was listening. The night grew colder, and the children climbed down from the shuttle to head home. On the way, Myra asked quietly, "Do you really think I could be a queen?" "Yes," Sam said without hesitation. "I know you could." Years later, Sam would remember that evening more clearly than any other day of his childhood. At the time, it felt like nothing more than two children talking about dreams and making promises under the stars. But that simple promise would travel with them across the years, across distance, and across the galaxy itself. It was a promise that would test their hearts and shape their destinies in ways they could not imagine. For now, they were only children. Sam went back to his home, where his father was waiting with another broken engine to repair. Myra went back to her room, where her books and stories waited for her. But both carried the weight of a promise made under a starry sky, a promise that seemed small then but would one day change the course of worlds. The years passed quickly in the quiet colony. Sam and Myra grew older, and their days of climbing rusted towers and running through the silver grass fields slowly turned into more serious duties. Sam began to help his father full-time in the repair bay. He learned how to weld broken panels, replace energy cores, and listen for the hidden hum inside an engine that told him if something was wrong. His hands grew stronger, his shoulders broader, but his eyes still carried the same dream of flying across the stars. Myra's life changed even faster. She spent less time with Sam and more time studying with the visiting teachers who came from other worlds. They were not ordinary teachers. Some were scholars from Earth, others were advisors sent by the Star Alliance, the great union of human and alien planets. They saw something special in Myra, something sharp and bright, like a flame that refused to be hidden. She absorbed knowledge quickly, spoke with confidence, and showed a talent for solving problems far bigger than the colony's simple struggles. Sam noticed the change but did not complain. He still saw her sometimes, under the old ironwood tree or on the roof of the shuttle, but their talks grew shorter. Myra was busy, her mind filled with lessons about law, languages, and history. Sometimes she would show Sam a new book or tell him about a story she had read, but often he only listened quietly, not fully understanding. He still kept her company, because being near her always felt right. One day, when they were both about 16, a group of tall ships arrived at the colony. They were not like the small freighters or cargo haulers that came for trade. These were shining vessels from the Star Alliance itself, with banners of blue and silver painted on their hulls. People in the colony gathered in awe to see them land. From the ships stepped envoys in fine uniforms, their voices carrying authority and purpose. They came for Myra. Her teachers had recommended her name to the Alliance. They believed she had the ability to become more than just a student in a small colony. They believed she could be trained to lead, to negotiate, and perhaps one day to command. The Alliance wanted to take her to their academy on the Central World, a place where only the most promising were sent. Myra's parents were honored, though frightened. To send their daughter across the stars was not an easy decision, but they knew such an opportunity would never come again. Myra herself was nervous, but her eyes shone with excitement. She wanted to see the worlds she had read about, to learn, to grow, and to test the limits of her dreams. Sam, however, felt a heavy weight press against his heart. When Myra told him, she found him in the repair bay, sitting under the half-open belly of a freighter. He looked up from his work, his face darkened with grease, his eyes unreadable. "You're leaving?" he asked. "Yes," Myra said softly. She held her notebook against her chest, the same notebook she had carried since they were children. "They want me to join the academy. It is a chance I cannot refuse." Sam set down his tool and leaned against the ship's frame. He wanted to say many things, but none of them found their way out. He wanted to tell her that without her the colony would feel empty, that he would miss her laughter and her endless questions. He wanted to remind her of the night under the stars, when he promised to marry her. But his voice stayed locked. Instead, he forced a smile. "Then you should go. You always said you wanted to see the galaxy." Myra stepped closer. Her eyes searched his face. "And you? What about your dream of flying? Will you stay here forever?" "I will," Sam said, though his chest ached. "This is my home. My father needs me. Someone has to keep the ships running." Myra looked as if she wanted to argue, but she stopped herself. She only nodded. "Then promise me something, Sam. Promise me you won't let your dream die. Fixing ships is good, but you belong in the sky." Sam shrugged. "I'll try." The day she left, the whole colony gathered at the landing field. Myra stood at the base of the shining ship, her parents beside her, her small bag in her hand. She turned to look at the crowd one last time. Her eyes searched until they found Sam. He stood at the back, his arms crossed, trying to hide the storm inside him. When their eyes met, she smiled, lifted her hand, and waved. Sam raised his hand in return. He wanted to shout, to remind her of the promise he had made when they were children, but the words caught in his throat. The ship's engines roared, the air shimmered, and with a rising hum, Myra was lifted into the sky. Sam watched until the ship became a streak of light and then disappeared among the stars. After that day, life in the colony returned to its normal rhythm, but for Sam, nothing felt the same. He worked longer hours in the repair bay, burying his feelings under engines and metal. At night, he would climb to the roof of the old shuttle and stare at the stars, wondering which one Myra was under. Sometimes, when he was alone, he whispered the words he had once spoken so boldly, "When we grow up, I'll marry you." Letters came at first. Myra wrote to him about the academy, about the vast cities with towers taller than mountains, about the aliens she met who spoke in voices like music. She wrote about the endless lessons, the debates, and the challenges that made her stronger. Sam read each letter again and again, tracing the lines with his fingers, imagining her voice. He wrote back, telling her about the colony, the repairs he made, the small adventures he had. But as the months turned into years, the letters slowed. Myra was busy, pulled deeper into the life of the academy. Sam understood, but each time the silence grew longer, it felt like another thread of their bond was fading. Still, he did not forget. He carried her promise like a secret flame, even when he doubted she remembered it. She was chasing greatness among the stars, and he was still in the colony, fixing engines. Yet deep in his heart, Sam believed their paths would cross again. For promises made under the stars have a way of waiting, no matter how far apart the paths may lead. The academy was nothing like the quiet colony Myra had left behind. It was a world of tall glass towers, endless libraries, and halls filled with voices from 100 different planets. Students from across the Alliance gathered there. Some were human, others were alien with bright scales, wings, or glowing eyes. They all carried sharp minds and great ambition. Myra, who had once sat under the ironwood tree with a notebook in her hand, now walked among them. At first, she felt small. The other students spoke many languages, quoted ancient laws, and debated with speed and confidence. Myra stumbled over her words in her first lessons. She sat in her quarters at night and wondered if she had made a mistake leaving home. But the same fire that had carried her through books and stories as a child now pushed her forward. She studied longer than anyone else. She asked questions until her teachers smiled at her determination. Slowly, she grew stronger. Years passed, and Myra began to stand out. She had a talent not only for learning but for leading. In training simulations, when groups of students were asked to solve crises, Myra was the one who listened to every voice, found the heart of the problem, and created a solution no one expected. When debates turned heated, she was the one who calmed the room with a steady voice. Her name became known in the academy as the girl who could turn chaos into order. One of her teachers, an elder named Veyron, often watched her closely. He was from a world of water, with skin like silver and eyes like deep oceans. One day, after a long session on interstellar law, he pulled her aside. "You have a gift, Myra," he said. "Not for speaking the loudest, but for seeing what others miss. One day, leaders will look to you, not because of your power, but because of your wisdom. Myra bowed her head, humbled, but inside her heart soared. She remembered Sam's words from long ago, spoken under the night sky of their colony. "You'll probably be a queen," he had said, half joking. At the time, she had laughed. Now, as she walked through the shining halls of the academy, she wondered if perhaps he had seen something in her even she had not seen. Back in the colony, Sam's life followed a different path. He became the chief mechanic after his father grew too old for heavy work. Sam could fix anything, old freighters, mining drills, or drones that farmers used in the fields. The people of the colony trusted him, and he carried his duties with quiet pride. Yet every night, when he looked up at the stars, he thought of Myra. Letters still came, but less often. Her words were full of distant worlds, grand councils, and challenges beyond his imagination. He answered with stories of the colony, but he feared his life must seem small to her now. Meanwhile, Myra's path climbed higher. By the time she was 20, she was chosen to serve as an aide in the Alliance Council itself. It was the heart of the galaxy's leadership, a great circular chamber where leaders from dozens of species debated the future. Myra entered that chamber for the first time with trembling hands. Yet when she listened to the voices rise in anger and distrust, she saw clearly what others overlooked. She began offering solutions quietly at first, to her superior. Soon, her voice was sought by others. Her greatest test came during a crisis that nearly broke the alliance. Two powerful species, long rivals, stood at the edge of war. Their fleets gathered in the dark of space, weapons armed. The council was paralyzed. Every day, voices clashed in the chamber, and every day the threat grew worse. Myra, still young compared to the veteran leaders, asked for a chance to speak. When she stood at the center of the chamber, many doubted her. She was only from a small colony, untested in war. But when she spoke, her voice carried calm strength. She reminded both sides of their shared victories, the enemies they had defeated together in the past, and the future they would destroy if they turned on each other. She did not plead or shout. She simply spoke the truth with clarity. Her words reached the ears of both sides. For the first time in weeks, the tension lowered. Negotiations began, and with Myra's steady guidance, an agreement was signed. The fleet stood down. War was avoided. The chamber echoed with applause. Leaders who had once ignored her now bowed their heads with respect. That day, Myra's name spread far beyond the council. She was no longer just a student from a forgotten colony. She was the voice that had prevented a war. More years passed, and Myra's influence grew. She was chosen as an ambassador, then as a governor of a central world. Wherever she went, peace followed. She won the trust of humans and aliens alike, not through force, but through the steady strength of her words and her vision. She never forgot where she came from, and she never forgot Sam. Sometimes, in quiet moments after long debates, she would open her old notebook. Inside were the scribbles of a child, dreams of exploring the stars, and on the last page, two words written long ago under the night sky, a promise. At the age of 28, the Alliance faced another test. The High Queen, the leader of the council, grew ill. Factions within the Alliance argued over who should lead next. Voices rose, alliances shifted, and once again the future trembled. In the end, the council turned to Myra. She had saved them once before. She had led with fairness and vision. The vote was cast, and it was nearly unanimous. Myra, the girl from the colony, became Queen of the Star Alliance. On the day of her coronation, the Grand Hall shone with banners. Leaders from across the galaxy gathered to witness her rise. Myra wore robes of blue and silver, symbols of peace and unity. She stood tall, her eyes calm but filled with purpose. When the crown was placed on her head, The chamber erupted with cheers. To the people of the galaxy, she was a symbol of hope. To Myra herself, she was simply someone who had followed her path, step by step, never turning away from her duty. But as she looked out at the sea of faces, her heart remembered a dusty colony, a broken shuttle under the stars, and a boy with grease on his hands who had once promised her something no crown could replace. Far away, Sam sat in the repair bay, tightening a bolt on an old freighter. The broadcast of her coronation played on a small screen in the corner. He watched as Myra lifted her hand to greet the galaxy. His chest tightened, pride and sadness mixing inside him. She was a queen now. He was still a mechanic. Yet deep within him, the flame of a childhood promise still burned, no matter how impossible it seemed. Sam's life had become a cycle of work and silence. He woke each morning to the sound of engines humming in the repair bay. He spent his days bent over machines, replacing old parts and bringing broken ships back to life. People in the colony depended on him, and he never failed them. Yet even as the years passed, he carried a quiet emptiness. At night, after the day's work, he often climbed the roof of the old shuttle, the one he and Myra had once called their castle. The paint was long gone, the glass broken, but the view of the sky was still the same. Sam would sit there and watch the stars. Somewhere out there, Myra ruled as Queen of the Alliance. He sometimes wondered if she still remembered the boy who once promised to marry her under those same stars. One afternoon, as Sam worked on an old cargo hauler, the ground suddenly shook. A deep humming filled the air. People rushed outside, pointing toward the sky. Sam wiped the grease from his hands and stepped out of the repair bay. His heart froze when he saw what was descending. It was a royal ship. Sleek and silver, it glided down like a bird of light. The people of the colony had never seen anything like it. Children cheered, elders whispered in awe, and workers dropped their tools to watch. The ship landed softly near the edge of the colony. Its hull shone with the crest of the Star Alliance, and from its ramp stepped guards in blue armor, their helmets polished like glass. Behind them came a woman in a flowing robe, carrying the authority of a messenger. She held a scroll marked with the Queen's seal. The crowd grew silent as she unrolled it and read aloud. By the order of Queen Myra of the Star Alliance, this summons is delivered to Sam, son of Daniel, mechanic of the outer colony. He is requested to appear at the royal court. Sam felt every eye turn toward him. For a moment, he thought he had misheard. Why would Myra, a queen ruling half the galaxy, send for him? His hands tightened around the rag he held, and his heart pounded in his chest. The messenger's gaze found him in the crowd. "You are Sam." "I am," he said, his voice steady though his body trembled inside. "Then prepare yourself," she said. "The Queen awaits." Sam wanted to refuse. He wanted to tell her that he was just a mechanic, that they must have made a mistake. But the people around him were staring with wonder and pride. To deny the summons would be to deny his own heart. Slowly, he nodded. That evening, he packed a small bag with a few clothes, his old notebook of ship designs, and a photo of his parents. The colony gathered to see him off. Many clapped him on the back, telling him he carried their honor into the stars. Some whispered that perhaps the Queen remembered her old friend. Sam said nothing. He only bowed to them all and stepped aboard the royal ship. The journey was unlike anything he had imagined. The ship was faster than any freighter he had repaired. Its corridors were lined with smooth silver walls, its engines purred like a living creature. Sam felt out of place, his rough clothes and grease-stained hands standing out against the polished halls. The guards treated him with respect, but their silence made him uneasy. As the ship traveled through jump gates and across glowing streams of light, Sam spent his nights staring from the viewing deck. Worlds flashed by, each one larger and brighter than the last. He had dreamed of seeing the galaxy, but he never thought it would happen like this, not as a visitor summoned to stand before a queen. After several days, the ship slowed. Through the wide glass windows, Sam saw a world unlike any he had ever known. Towers rose like mountains, bridges stretched across oceans, and ships filled the skies like flocks of birds. At the heart of the world stood the palace of the Queen, a shining fortress of crystal and steel. The ship landed within its great courtyard. Guards and attendants bowed as Sam was led inside. His steps echoed on the polished floor. The air was cool, carrying the faint sound of music from distant halls. Sam's heart raced with every step. He had faced broken engines that could explode at any second, but nothing had ever made him this nervous. Finally, the doors of the throne room opened. Sam stepped inside. The hall was vast, filled with banners of blue and silver. Leaders from many species stood at the sides, their eyes curious as they watched him enter. At the far end, upon a high seat, sat Myra. She wore robes of deep blue, her crown simple yet shining with authority. Her posture was calm, her gaze steady. Yet when her eyes met Sam's, for the briefest moment, her lips curved into the smallest of smiles. The messenger announced him. Sam of the Outer Colony, mechanic, summoned by Her Majesty, Queen Myra of the Star Alliance. Sam bowed awkwardly, unsure how one was meant to greet a queen. Your Majesty, he said, his voice low. Myra rose from her seat and walked down the steps. The room grew silent as she approached. When she stood before him, her expression softened. It has been many years, Sam, she said. Her voice was warm, familiar, carrying both strength and memory. Sam looked at her, hardly believing. She was no longer the girl who once sat beside him on an old shuttle, but her eyes were the same. It has, he said quietly. Myra studied him for a long moment, then spoke so that all in the hall could hear. You once made me a promise under the stars. Do you remember it? Sam felt the air leave his lungs. The words struck him like a storm. He remembered every detail: the night sky, the broken shuttle, the warmth of her hand. He swallowed and nodded. I remember. Good, Myra said softly. Because I have not forgotten. Gasps rippled through the hall. Leaders whispered to one another, shocked that the Queen spoke of such a personal bond before them all. But Myra's gaze never left Sam. He stood frozen, torn between pride and fear. How could a simple mechanic stand beside a queen? He wanted to speak, to tell her he was not worthy, but the words failed him. All he could do was meet her eyes and feel the weight of the past pressing against the present. In that moment, Sam understood that his life was about to change forever. The promise of 2 children, spoken under the stars, had returned to claim its place in the grand halls of power. The throne room emptied after the ceremony. The leaders and guards withdrew, leaving Sam and Myra alone in the great hall. The silence pressed heavy on him. He shifted on his feet, unsure if he should speak. Myra stood at the center, watching him with calm eyes that seemed to pierce through every wall he tried to build. You have grown, Myra said finally. But you are still the same Sam I remember. Still carrying grease on your hands, still standing with that same stubborn look. Sam gave a nervous laugh. And you are not the same girl who climbed broken shuttles with me. He shook his head. You are a queen now. I don't even know how to stand in front of you without feeling out of place. Myra's smile softened. You are not out of place. Not here. Not with me. Her words should have comforted him, but they only tightened the knot in his chest. He wanted to believe her, but he looked at the grand hall, the banners, the crown on her head. He thought of himself in his small workshop, bent over broken engines. The gap between them felt like a canyon he could never cross. Myra, he said slowly, why did you call me here? There must be 100 commanders, leaders, and great minds at your side. Why bring me, a mechanic from a forgotten colony? Myra stepped closer. Because I trust you more than all of them. I have faced lies and betrayal in these halls. I have seen power turn friends into enemies. But you once gave me a promise when we had nothing. That promise still means more to me than crowns or titles. Sam lowered his gaze. That promise, it was made by children. We didn't know what the future would bring. I never thought you would become this. And yet you kept it in your heart, Myra said gently. Do not deny it, Sam. I see it in your eyes. Sam did not answer. He felt exposed, as if Myra could read every thought. Part of him longed to tell her how many nights he had sat under the stars, whispering the words of that promise. But another part pulled back, warning him that this could never be real. They walked together through the palace gardens. The air was filled with the scent of flowers from many worlds, glowing softly in the night. The paths wound between fountains and statues, each one a gift from distant planets. Myra walked with grace, but when she spoke, her voice carried the same warmth as when they were children. Do you remember, she asked, the time we climbed the tower near the fields? You slipped and nearly fell, and I pulled you up. You laughed the whole way down, saying you would never be afraid as long as I was there. Sam smiled faintly. I remember. I also remember you scolding me for being careless. And do you remember the night you first told me you wanted to fix ships and fly them? Myra said. You said one day you would take me to the stars. Sam nodded, his smile fading. Those were dreams. Simple dreams. Yours became real. Mine stayed in the dirt. Myra stopped walking. She turned to face him, her eyes fierce now. Do not speak of yourself that way. You have strength, Sam. A different kind, but no less important. You are steady. You are loyal. You see things others overlook. Do you know how rare that is? Sam felt his throat tighten. He wanted to argue, but her words struck too deeply. He had spent so long thinking of himself as small, as someone who could never stand in her world. But here she was, a queen, telling him he mattered. Myra, he whispered, I don't belong in your palace. I don't belong beside a queen. You belong beside me, Myra said firmly. Not because of my crown, not because of duty. Because you are Sam. The boy who once promised me forever. The man who kept that promise in silence, even when I was far away. The weight of her words made Sam's heart race. He turned away, walking a few steps to the edge of the garden where the city lights stretched across the horizon. His thoughts spun. Could he really stand beside her? Could he accept the life she offered, knowing he would always feel like the mechanic pulled into a world too grand for him? The next days passed with Sam living inside the palace. Everywhere he went, people looked at him with curiosity. Some whispered questions. Why had the queen brought him here? Who was he, this man with plain clothes and rough hands? Others looked with suspicion, fearing he might hold influence over her. Sam felt the weight of their eyes. Myra, however, remained steady. She included him in her meals, spoke with him in private, and sometimes asked for his opinion in council matters. At first he tried to avoid giving answers, but Myra pressed him gently until he spoke. To his surprise, his simple thoughts often brought clarity where long debates had brought only confusion. One evening, Myra led him to the highest balcony of the palace. The sky above was filled with ships moving in ordered lines, their lights like rivers of stars. Below, the city glowed with millions of homes and towers. This is the world I rule, she said softly. But it is heavy, Sam. Every choice I make carries lives in its balance. Sometimes I stand alone against storms I cannot show to anyone. But when I look at you, I remember who I am beneath the crown. I remember the girl in the fields, the girl who dreamed. That is why I need you. Sam's heart ached. He wanted to believe her, but doubt still lingered. And if I fail you? If I cannot carry this weight. Myra turned to him, her voice quiet but strong. Then we will carry it together. The stars reflected in her eyes. For the first time since he had stepped into the palace, Sam felt the knot in his chest begin to loosen. She was not asking him to be a king or a warrior. She was asking him to be what he had always been, her friend, her promise, her strength in silence. But as Sam stood on that balcony, feeling the pull of her words, a shadow was already moving against them. Enemies watched the queen with envy and fear. Rivals whispered in hidden chambers, plotting to test her rule. And soon, Sam would learn that trust and loyalty would be tested not in quiet gardens, but in fire and danger. The palace had grown quieter as the days passed, but that silence was not peace. It was the stillness before a storm. Sam felt it in the way the guards tightened their patrols, the way Myra's council spoke in hushed tones, and the way Myra herself stayed awake late into the night, studying reports that never seemed to end. One morning, the warning finally came. The rival empire on the eastern edge of the galaxy had moved its fleets closer to Myra's world. They had long envied her growing power and feared the unity she brought to scattered colonies. Now they sought to test her strength. The council gathered in the war chamber, a vast room filled with glowing maps of stars and shifting lines of ships. Sam stood quietly at Myra's side, still feeling out of place but unwilling to leave her alone. The councillors debated, their voices sharp. Some urged Myra to strike first, to send fleets before the enemy could gather. Others urged caution, fearing a trap. Myra listened with patience, but her eyes often drifted toward Sam. When the voices grew too loud, she finally raised her hand. The room fell silent. "Sam," she said softly, "what do you see?" The councillors turned in surprise. Some frowned, wondering why their queen would ask a mechanic for advice on war. Sam felt the weight of every eye on him. He hesitated, then stepped forward. "I am no soldier," he began, "but I know machines. I know when a part rattles, when a system strains. This war feels the same. The rival empire is testing your strength. They want to see if fear will make you break before they even fire a shot. If you attack too quickly, you may play into their hands. If you wait too long, they will grow bold. You must show them that you will not bend, but also that you will not be tricked." A murmur spread through the council. Some nodded reluctantly. Myra's eyes shone with quiet approval. "Then we will stand ready," she declared. "Our fleets will not strike first, but they will not retreat. Let the enemy see our strength, and let them know we are not afraid." The council bowed to her decision. But Sam noticed the unease in their faces. He knew this was only the beginning. That night, Sam found Myra on the balcony once more, gazing at the stars. Her crown glowed faintly in the light of the city below, but her shoulders seemed heavy. "They will come soon," she whispered. "I can feel it. War always comes when power begins to rise." Sam stood beside her. "Then I will be here when it does." She turned to him, searching his face. "You should not have to carry this, Sam. You were meant to build ships, not fight wars." "Ships break," Sam said quietly. "So do people. I learned how to fix one. Maybe I can help fix the other too." For a moment, Myra's hand brushed his. She drew strength from his presence, and he from hers. The next week brought the storm. The rival empire's fleet appeared on the edge of Myra's system, a dark wave of ships with weapons ready. Alarms rang through the palace, and the people looked to the skies with fear. Myra's fleet rose to meet the threat, filling the stars with lines of light. Sam watched from the command hall, his heart pounding. He had never been part of a battle before. Engines he understood. Blasters and warships, less so. But when he looked at Myra, standing tall at the center of it all, his fear quieted. The first clash came suddenly. Distant flashes lit up the darkness of space as the fleets exchanged fire. The ground shook faintly under the power of distant blasts. Reports streamed into the hall, some filled with victory, others with loss. Sam noticed something strange in the reports. Patterns that did not fit. He stepped closer to the glowing star map, frowning. "Myra," he said quickly, "look here. Their main fleet is pressing hard at the front, but these ships at the side are moving too slowly. They are holding back. It looks like a trap." Myra leaned closer. Her eyes widened. "You are right. They want us to chase the front line, so the hidden flank can cut us apart." She gave swift orders. Her commanders adjusted the fleet's movement, holding their position instead of pursuing. The rival empires' plan began to unravel. Their hidden flank was forced to reveal itself too early, and Myra's fleet countered with strength. Sam could hardly breathe as he watched the battle unfold. His words, simple and unplanned, had shifted the tide. Myra glanced at him once, and he saw pride in her eyes. Hours passed like days. The battle raged, but Myra's fleet held firm. When the rival empire finally retreated, the skies were scarred with wreckage, but Myra's world still stood free. The palace celebrated with relief, but Myra did not join the cheers. She walked with Sam through the quiet halls afterward. "You saved us," she said softly. Sam shook his head. "I only noticed what others missed." "That is why you are here," Myra replied. "Not because you are a warrior, not because you wear armor. But because you see. And because you stand with me, no matter the storm." Sam felt warmth in his chest, a mix of pride and confusion. He had not wanted this war, yet here he was, part of it. He thought again of the promise they had made as children. Perhaps it was never about marriage or crowns. Perhaps it was about always being there, no matter what path life took. But as peace settled over the city, Sam could not shake a sense of unease. The rival empire had retreated, but not broken. They would come again, stronger and more cunning. And when they did, he knew his bond with Myra would be tested even more. For now, though, he stayed by her side. Together they looked at the stars above the balcony. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was steady, filled with trust. The storm had passed, but greater storms were waiting beyond the horizon. The stars were quiet after the battle, but silence in space never lasted long. Myra knew this. So did Sam. The rival empire had been pushed back, but their pride had been wounded. Pride never healed quickly. Life in the palace returned to its rhythm. The markets reopened, children played in the courtyards, and workers rebuilt the defense towers that had been struck. Yet behind the joy, everyone knew more trials were coming. Myra's crown felt heavier each day, but she carried it with calm grace. Sam remained at her side. He was no soldier, no noble, but people began to notice him. Whispers followed him in the halls. Some said he was Myra's advisor, others that he was her closest friend. A few even whispered about the promise from long ago, the one they had made as children. Sam tried not to listen, but he could not ignore the looks of curiosity and expectation. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the palace walls in gold, Myra found Sam in the old workshop. He had returned to the place where his tools were kept, repairing a small starship engine that had been damaged in the fighting. His hands moved with skill, but his face was distant, lost in thought. "You always return here," Myra said, stepping into the workshop. Sam smiled faintly. "Engines are honest. They break, they show you why, and you fix them. People are not so simple." Myra walked closer, her long robe brushing the floor. She looked at the engine, then at Sam. "You have changed, Sam. When you first arrived, you seemed small in this palace. Now, I see the council listen to you. The people respect you. You are part of this world. Sam set down his tool and wiped his hands. And yet, I still feel like a boy from a village who once promised too much. Her eyes softened. You promised with a pure heart. That is worth more than the crown I wear. The words lingered between them, heavy and bright. Before either could say more, a messenger entered. The rival empire had sent a declaration. They demanded Myra surrender her crown and bend to their rule. If she refused, they would bring war again, this time with allies from beyond her borders. The council gathered quickly. Some feared another battle so soon. Others argued surrender would only bring chains. Myra listened in silence, then dismissed them. Only Sam remained with her in the chamber after the council left. She turned to him. I will not surrender. But this fight will be harder than before. They come not just with ships, but with allies. If I lose, my people will lose everything. Sam's chest tightened. He wanted to tell her to flee, to find safety, to leave the burden behind. But when he saw the fire in her eyes, he knew those words would only dishonor her strength. Instead, he said, then we fight. And we do not fight alone. Myra tilted her head. What do you mean? You united colonies once with your courage, Sam replied. Now we must do it again, but wider. There are worlds who fear the rival empire as much as we do. If they see your stand, they will rise with you. I will go to them. I will remind them what it means to be free. Her lips parted in surprise. You would leave the palace? Travel the stars to speak for me? I would, Sam said firmly. Because when we were kids, I said I would stand with you. That promise did not end when you became queen. It only began. For the first time in days, Myra smiled fully. A true smile, one that reached her eyes. Then go. Carry my words to the stars. Let them know that freedom has a voice. And so Sam left the palace, not as a mechanic, not as a boy, but as a messenger of hope. He traveled in a small ship, flying to distant colonies, to moons hidden under shadow, to stations that floated between forgotten trade routes. At first, people doubted him. He had no crown, no army, only his voice. But he spoke with honesty, with the same plain words he had used when fixing ships. He told them of Myra, the queen who stood not for power but for her people. He told them of the battle they had already survived, and of the greater storm that was coming. Slowly, one by one, worlds began to listen. Old ships were repaired. Fighters volunteered. Flags of forgotten colonies were raised again. Sam had never led an army, but his journey awakened something larger than any fleet, belief. Months passed. When he returned to Myra's world, he did not return alone. Behind his ship came hundreds of others, each carrying people who had chosen to stand with the queen. The skies above the palace filled with light, not of war, but of unity. When Sam stepped off his ship, the crowd cheered. Myra was there, waiting for him. She wore no crown in that moment, only a simple dress, her hair loose in the wind. She looked at him with pride that words could not capture. You did it, she whispered as he reached her. No, Sam replied. We did it. Because you believed in me, just as your people believe in you. The rival empire returned, as promised. Their fleet stretched across the stars, dark and endless. But this time, they did not face Myra's world alone. They faced a united front of colonies, moons, and stations that had once been scattered and weak, now bound together by hope. The battle was fierce, but it was not the same as before. Myra commanded with wisdom, Sam supported with insight, and the allied fleets fought with hearts that burned brighter than fear. In the end, the rival empire was forced to retreat, broken and humbled. When victory came, it was not just Myra's. It belonged to every world that had stood with her. The galaxy whispered her name, not as a queen of one world, but as a leader of many. That night, as fireworks lit the skies, Sam and Myra stood once more on the balcony. The air was filled with laughter, music, and the sound of freedom. Myra turned to Sam. "Do you remember the day you made that promise?" Sam chuckled softly. "How could I forget? I was just a boy, and you were just a girl." "And now?" she asked, her voice tender. He looked at her, at the queen who had become his closest bond, his greatest challenge, and his truest friend. "Now I know what that promise really meant. It was never just about marriage. It was about never leaving your side. About carrying each other through every storm." Myra's eyes shone in the starlight. She reached for his hand, and for the first time, she did not hide the warmth in her touch. "Then you have kept it, Sam. You have kept it better than I ever dreamed." The people below cheered, the stars above glimmered, and in that moment, Sam felt peace. The boy who once promised had become the man who fulfilled it. And beside the queen who once believed in him, he knew the future would be faced together, whatever it held. The promise of childhood had become the foundation of a new world. And it would endure as long as the stars themselves.